This NYSERDA webinar that is overviewing and detailing the inclusive storage incentives, which will be launched in the first quarter of 2026 and will be supporting on-site energy storage systems that are sited in and benefiting low-income and disadvantaged community households. My name is Shyam Mehta. I'm a director at NYSERDA, part of our Integrated Energy Solutions team, under which the distributed energy storage programs are housed. And along with a couple of my colleagues, I will be walking you through the presentation materials today. If you could go to the next slide, please. So before we get underway, just a few housekeeping notes. Today's webinar is being recorded. And for those who are not able to make it or want to refer back to the materials, a copy of both the recording in video form as well as the presentation slides in PowerPoint or PDF form will be available on NYSERDA's residential retail energy storage webpage in the webinar presentation section. There will be an email that will be sent out to members of the energy storage mailing list that will be clarifying where those materials will be housed. All attendees are muted upon entry to the webinar. If you have a question, please submit it through the Q&A feature in the WebEx console, and then we will get to hopefully all the questions at the end of the presentation during the Q&A section. If you're having any technical problems with using the Q&A function or any other aspect of the WebEx console, please email energystorage@nyserda.ny.gov for real-time troubleshooting. Next slide. So just a quick introduction to NYSERDA's distributed energy storage team that is here today and also that supports the program. I mentioned myself, Shyam Mehta. I'm the program lead for the distributed energy storage programs, which include both the residential energy storage program as well as our retail energy storage program, retail being our unique moniker for distribution or distributed non-residential, generally commercial scale energy storage. I'm accompanied by Jasmine Lim, who is a project manager at and part of our energy storage program team here on the DER side and has led the design and implementation of the inclusive storage incentives. Along with her, other members of the team include John Patinos and Marie Peters, who are the operations leads for retail storage. We have Jamie Lackey from our shared services team, who will be going over some of the income eligibility verification requirements. Luke Forster, who provides program support in a number of areas, as well as Calvin Bordas. And then finally, many of you will know that we have a dedicated clean energy siting team, which also has dedicated staff supporting energy storage led by Bill Oberker and Veronica Polanco. So as I mentioned earlier, we have an energy storage inbox at NYSERDA, which is the go-to email for all program questions. This is the most efficient way to get any questions regarding any of the program aspects or the energy storage market in New York answered and is monitored by the entire team. So highly encourage folks to use that email in reaching out. And if you haven't, and we will also be providing information on how to join the energy storage mailing list to get a notice on updates and developments from the program team. That is also something that we highly encourage doing for engaged stakeholders. And then final note is additional details on what we're talking about today in terms of program design, rules, requirements will be listed in the residential retail energy storage program manual. So before the inclusive and storage incentives that we're talking about today go live, that program manual will be updated to include the information that we are presenting today. And once again, if you're part of that energy storage mailing list, you will receive notification as to when that manual is updated. Next slide, please. So in terms of the agenda for today, we're going to start by providing some background and context for how we got here in terms of just at the crux of launching the inclusive storage incentives, going back all the way back to the enshrinement of our energy storage targets, and then the filing and approval of the energy storage roadmap the most recent roadmap that was approved in 2024, and then the approval of these new programs. We'll then be providing a high-level overview of these specific incentives, the inclusive storage incentives for on-site energy storage, benefiting disadvantaged community and low-income households. And then we'll be doing a deeper dive into each variant of the inclusive storage incentive. So first going through the retail inclusive storage incentive, and then the residential inclusive storage incentive, going over rules, requirements, the application process, funding levels, and incentive rates for each of these incentives. And the residential ISI section will include a detailed section on the income eligibility verification process for the residential ISI, income eligibility being one of the eligibility pathways for that incentive. And then finally, we'll leave at least half an hour, hopefully, to answer all the questions that we'll be collecting through the chat today. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to my colleague, Luke Forster, to take you through the next couple of sections. Luke?
Shyam, thank you for that intro. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So before we dig into the details of the inclusive storage incentive, I just wanted to take a moment and sort of level set on some of the definitions in different project types we'll be talking about today. We have 4 up on the screen here. First, we have residential energy storage, which is installed behind the meter, typically at a customer's home, servicing that customer's household electric usage. Residential projects are often about 5 to 10 kilowatts, but can be as large as 25 kilowatts. Next, we have what we call retail storage projects, which includes any sort of project serving a commercial entity, a non-for-profit, a business, a government entity. Those can be installed behind the meter, servicing that customer's energy usage at the site. They can also be installed front of the meter and provide grid services to the distribution network. Retail storage projects can go up to 5 megawatts AC in New York. We typically see that the on-site behind-the-meter projects are a little bit smaller, typically several hundred kilowatts. Finally, we have larger bulk storage projects that serve New York State's transmission network and wholesale market. These are 20 megawatts and up. These are outside of the scope of today's discussion. NYSERDA has a separate bulk energy storage team that's running their own program in solicitation. So today we're talking about residential and retail energy storage. Next slide, please. So here's a quick timeline of energy storage policy in New York State. Back in 2019, the Climate Act, or CLCPA, was passed, which codified a goal of New York State installing 3 gigawatts of energy storage by 2030. The Climate Act also laid a framework specifying that 35 to 40% of project benefits should go to disadvantaged communities. If you see the acronym DAC in this presentation, it's referring to disadvantaged communities. In 2022, the governor had a State of the State address, increasing that goal to 6 gigawatts of energy storage by 2030, and directed NYSERDA to file a roadmap to chart a path to achieving that goal. We filed that roadmap in 2022, proposing new programs and funding for different types of projects. Again, residential scale, retail or commercial scale, and bulk scale. That roadmap laid out megawatt allocations and some proposed program designs, including addressing how disadvantaged communities would benefit from these projects. In 2024, New York Public Service Commission issued an order essentially approving the design laid out in the 2022 roadmap with a few minor modifications. This past February, NYSERDA filed a storage implementation plan for the residential and retail storage programs, including much more detailed program designs, including initial incentive rates and megawatt targets for disadvantaged communities. Finally, we're going to launch, this past spring and summer, NYSERDA launched incentives for residential and retail energy storage projects. This is our market rate offering. Market rate meaning simply non-DAC specific. So those programs are currently live. The megawatt hour blocks are open. In the next step, we'll be opening up the DAC LMI specific incentives in the near future. Next slide, please. The Climate Act specified that for the NYSERDA incentive programs, at least 35% with a target of 40% of program benefits should accrue to disadvantaged communities. The 2024 Energy Storage Order provided some guidance on how those benefits would be calculated and considered for energy storage projects. The guidance varies by project type and market segment. For bulk storage projects and off-site front-of-the-meter retail storage projects, they can reduce fossil fuel emissions from peaker plants across the electric network where they're built, which has benefits to all residents in the area, including those in disadvantaged communities, by providing cleaner air and reducing the number of hours per year that these heavily polluting peaker plants run. So the 6 gigawatt order directed that at least 35% of offsite storage projects funded by the new NYSERDA incentive programs, totaling over 1,500 megawatts, must be sited downstate where peaker plants are clustered and are more clustered. In particular, that's NYSO zones G through K, which stretches from the lower Hudson Valley down to New York City and Long Island. The order further specified that 30% of those procurements must be in New York City, Zone J, and at least 5% of those procurements must be in zones G, H, I, or K. I'll also note that off-site energy storage projects can provide additional benefits, such as LMI bill crediting through the statewide Solar for All program. Next slide, please. For on-site retail storage projects, they typically provide benefits to the site where they are installed, including backup power during outages and electric bill savings through demand charge reduction, time of use rates, or demand response programs. Therefore, the value of these projects is primarily to the site owners. So the 6 gigawatt order directed that at least 35% of the on-site behind-the-meter storage program procurements must be allocated to projects in disadvantaged community census tracts or to income-eligible households. So with this guidance in mind, NYSERDA has developed and is launching an enriched set of incentives for residential and retail storage, known as the Inclusive Storage Incentive for eligible projects. Next slide, please. Next, I'm going to give a quick overview of the retail and residential inclusive storage incentive. And after I provide that quick overview, my colleague Jasmine is going to do a much more in-depth, detailed review of each of those programs. Next slide, please. Here's a quick recap of the different benefits that different storage projects can provide. Resiliency and backup power, protection against outages can be provided by residential and on-site retail storage projects. Bill credits and electric bill discounts, such as through statewide Solar for All, can be provided by off-site storage projects, including community storage. Finally, fossil fuel peaker displacement can occur from off-site retail and bulk storage projects, particularly those located downstate near the peaker plants. Next slide, please. In designing the ISI, NYSERDA reached out and had extensive engagement and discussion with a large number of stakeholders. So we built on input from many parties and partners, including we sent out a request for information to a network of stakeholders. We had engagement with the Energy Equitative Collaborative members. We connected with other government agencies, including Department of Health and Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance. We collaborated with other state agencies and out-of-state coalitions, including California's SGIP and the Clean Energy State Alliance. We solicited feedback from the utilities, particularly Con Ed and National Grid, and we connected with other NYSERDA teams that have expertise in the climate equity field, including resilience, communities and local government, and New York Sun. If you take a look at the ISI design, you'll see it draws heavily on lessons learned from the New York Sun programs, such as the New York Sun Solar Energy Equity Framework programs. Next slide. The inclusive storage incentive is an enriched version of the existing base market rate incentive already offered by NYSERDA. To receive an ISI incentive, projects must meet all requirements of the market rate, residential or retail incentive program, plus additional criteria regarding customer eligibility. The residential ISI program will allocate 80 megawatts, which is 40% of the total residential storage program design. The retail ISI program will allocate at least 60 megawatts. That's 40% of the expected upper bound of on-site retail projects. The available ISI capacity, both dollars and megawatt hours, will be tracked on a real-time dashboard on the NYSERDA Energy Storage website, very similar to how we're currently tracking the existing market rate programs. The incentive will be structured in terms of blocks as well. We anticipate launching the residential and retail ISI in the first quarter of 2026. As we draw closer, we will send out updates to stakeholders with more precise launch date information. Next slide. Here's a quick overview of the retail ISI. NYSERDA will allocate $17.75 million for the initial block of 15 megawatts or 45 megawatt hours. The initial block rate is $350 per kilowatt hour. It will be a single statewide block, open to projects installed in Central Hudson, Con Edison, National Grid, NYSEG, RG&E, and Orange and Rockland utility territories. Projects installed on Long Island will not be eligible. The capacity allocations and incentive rates for future blocks will be determined based on ongoing analysis of market conditions, uptake trends, and stakeholder feedback. In order to qualify for the ISI, retail projects must meet all of the following criteria in addition to the requirements of the market rate program. 1, be sited in a disadvantaged community census tract. 2, be connected behind the meter or on site and configured to provide backup power during a grid outage. And 3, be sited at an eligible public or nonprofit critical facility or eligible affordable housing unit. Examples include medical facilities, emergency response facilities, schools, shelters, and cooling centers. We will provide a more thorough list on a later slide. Next slide, please. This is a quick thumbnail of the residential ISI. Again, we will provide full details later on in this presentation. NYSERDA will allocate 11.25 million for the initial block of 25 megawatt hours or 10 megawatts. The initial incentive rate is $450 per kilowatt hour. It will be a statewide block open to Central Hudson, Con Edison, National Grid, NYSEG, RG&E, and Orange and Rockland customers. Again, Long Island projects are not eligible, but please note that we do have an existing Long Island specific affordable storage incentive already on the streets. Future blocks will be based on market conditions, analysis of uptake trends, and stakeholder feedback. To qualify for the residential ISI, projects must meet the requirements of the Residential Storage Incentive Program, plus one of the following. One, to be located in a disadvantaged community census tract, as identified by the Climate Justice Working Group. Two, service an owner-occupied residence with household income less than 80% of the area or state median income, whichever is higher. This is determined by an income eligibility verification application, same way it's done in New York Sun. Or three, service a residential 1 to 4 unit affordable housing property. Next slide, please. That concludes my section. I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague, Jasmine Lim.
Thank you so much, Luke. Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine Lim. I am the project manager who will be primarily responsible for administering the inclusive storage incentives upon our launch in next quarter 2026. Before I give an overview of the details and process for the retail and residential ISI, I would just like to call out that if you have any questions you would like to submit prior to our Q&A session, we request that you please use the chat feature to submit your questions, as the typical Q&A feature for WebEx is no longer available. So with that, I'll start by taking everyone through the details of eligibility criteria and the application process for the retail ISI. So like we mentioned before, there are three major criteria buckets for the retail ISI, and the first two are depicted on this slide, so I'll just give an explainer of what eligibility actually means in this case. So starting with the first eligibility criterion, which is the geographic path. Sites are required to report a site address that's located within a disadvantaged community census tract, which all the census tracts that are for disadvantaged communities are depicted in the map on the right side. So if your project site address is located in one of those blue areas, then you would be eligible for the retail ISI if you meet the other criteria as well. The next criterion category is whether your project is configured for behind-the-meter backup power. To demonstrate this, you would need to provide an electrical drawing that reflects both behind-the-meter configuration and then also a transfer switch that enables islanding during an outage. Next slide, please. So this is the last bucket of criteria that's required to qualify for the retail ISI, which is that your project site is an active critical facility or affordable housing property. So in order to demonstrate this, we would require that you provide documentation of your facility's status. So if you have a nonprofit project site, we would expect to see 501c3 nonprofit documentation, such as an IRS determination letter. If your facility is a public or government facility, we'd like to see a government designation letter. So for example, if you are a critical facility in New York City, we might request something like a letter on city letterhead signed by DCAS. And then finally, if you are at an affordable housing property, we would require an award letter from an eligible affordable housing program. I'll walk everyone through the eligible affordable housing programs on the eligibility proxies slide in a little bit. So that's the first type of documentation you need to provide here. And then the second document, which is already required for the market rate application, is just 12 months of utility bills. However, for the retail ISI, we would check that the name and address correspond to the critical facility or affordable housing property that you have. If the critical facility type is not self-evident, I will be showing you a list of the critical facility types that will qualify. If they're not self-evident, then we would require further evidence of the facility's listing in a relevant government database. Next slide, please. So now I'll give an explainer of the list of critical facilities that are eligible. So in order to ensure objectivity and to minimize discretion from the NYSERDA program team in our review process, we developed the list based on established definitions of critical facilities that are used in other government-led resilience, emergency management, and disaster recovery programs. Most of the sites in our list come from FEMA's Public Assistance Program and Policy Guide. We especially leaned upon tables 3 and 4 in that guide. So all the facility types are listed on the following slides, but we will include the complete list of critical facility types in the program manual, along with suggested databases for verification of additional facilities that are not self-evident from the name and address. Next slide, please. So the first bucket of critical facilities we have are medical care facilities. So these include clinics, hospitals and related facilities, pharmacies, hospices and nursing homes, dialysis facilities, and facilities that provide inpatient care for convalescent or chronic disease patients. Next slide, please. Emergency services facilities are also eligible. These include ambulance, fire protection, rescue, and police facilities. We include jails, correctional facilities, and detention facilities as well, along with other facilities used in emergency response, including cooling shelters, other emergency shelters, and finally, other facilities related to emergency preparedness, communication, and operation during emergencies. I'd also like to note that we include public water utilities as a critical facility as well. This is a little bit separate from the nature of the emergency and medical facilities, but this is for any public water supply for drinking water, fire suppression, or electricity generation, along with sewer service and water treatment. Next slide, please. We additionally include education and community facilities, especially since these are already commonly used as congregation sites during times of emergency. So for educational facilities, we include primary or secondary education, higher education, or community education buildings. We include childcare centers and community centers. And we also include facilities that provide other non-critical but essential social services, such as houses of worship, libraries, and senior citizen centers. Next slide, please. We include low-income housing. I would like to note that these low-income housing properties can be any as defined by federal or SLTT law or regulation, and I'll be walking through a list of the eligible affordable housing programs on a slide that's coming soon in the presentation. We took feedback from industry, and in addition to public and nonprofit owned affordable housing properties, we are also now including affordable housing properties owned by private entities as long as they also participate in one of those eligible government affordable housing programs. We're also including food assistance program facilities, particularly food banks and food bank storage. And then we're also including facilities that do not provide medical care, but provide other essential social services of a similar nature. So these include homeless shelters, residential services for families of domestic abuse or disabilities, alcohol and drug treatment and other rehabilitation service facilities, assisted living and custodial care, daycare for individuals with disabilities or access and functional needs, and then finally health and safety services, including animal control services. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned on the previous slide, this is our list of eligibility proxies or eligible affordable housing programs that would qualify for multifamily affordable housing projects applying for the retail ISI. I'd like to note that these are the same that are used in New York Sun's multifamily affordable housing incentive for those who are already familiar with that existing program through New York Sun. But to just give a quick overview, the most updated list as of this fall includes A, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and U.S. Department of Agriculture, Rural Development, and other federally regulated low-income housing. B, New York State Homes and Community Renewal, or HCR, regulated affordable housing. C, low-income housing tax credits. D, New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development, or HPD, regulated low-income housing. E, State of New York Mortgage Agency, or SNYMA, mortgage insurance. F, New York City Department of Homeless Services and Department of Health and Mental Hygiene facilities. And finally, G, New York State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance and Office of Mental Health Housing. Once again, the program manual will be updated prior to our launch to include the complete eligibility requirements. Next slide, please. So now I'll take a moment to explain the relevant application features that would enable you to qualify your project for the retail ISI. I think it's important to note that there will not be a separate application for the inclusive storage incentives. Instead, the inclusive storage incentives can be qualified for using features that will exist in the existing market rate applications that everyone is already familiar with. So in the case of the retail ISI, the first relevant feature is on the additional project details page. I believe this is the fourth page of the existing application. There will be yes or no questions added to enable you to report whether your project meets the ISI eligibility criteria that I mentioned, such as, is your customer a nonprofit, public or government, or affordable housing property? Will your project interconnect behind the meter? And will your project be configured to operate as backup power during a grid outage? Next slide, please. The next relevant feature will be on the project information page. This behind or in front of the meter question already exists in the market rate application, but in order to qualify for the retail ISI, the only eligible metering type is behind the meter. Community distributed generation and remote crediting projects are not eligible for the ISI at this time. Next slide, please. So finally, the last relevant section of the application for the retail ISI is the documents upload page. This is where we would need you to add the required documents to prove your eligibility. So you would upload your proof of facility type, such as nonprofit, public or government facility, or affordable housing property. And then if your critical facility type is not self-evident from the name and address, we might request you to include your listing in the relevant government database. We'll provide a list of relevant government databases in the program manual update. I'll note that there are some existing documents in the market rate application that we'll also review for the ISI, including the electrical drawing and the 12 months of utility bills. Next slide, please. So in terms of timeline and next steps for the retail ISI, of course, today's presentation is being recorded and we'll distribute it to you all in the coming days. We will be launching the retail ISI in the first quarter of 2026. We'll be launching the retail ISI and residential ISI together at that time. We will be providing the updates to the program manual and energy storage website upon launch. And then finally, all program contractors will receive an email announcement closer to the launch date. Next slide, please. So now I'll take you through the details and process for the residential ISI in a similar format to the retail ISI. Next slide, please. So residential ISI projects, unlike the retail ISI, only need to meet one of the following criteria. So the first one is geographic eligibility. We expect most projects to qualify this way. And the way you would qualify is that you would report a site address in your application that's located within a disadvantaged community census tract. So once again, our application will check on the back end if your address is within a DAC census tract. And if so, then you automatically qualify for the higher residential ISI block rate. You do not need to submit any other documentation. So we hope that that is convenient for you all. However, if you are not located in a DAC census tract, there's still a way for your project to qualify via income eligibility. In this case, you would want to assist your customer to apply and be approved for NYSERDA's income eligibility verification application. Once again, this is the same income verification application that is used by New York Sun programs, particularly affordable solar. So once your customer is approved, then in the residential storage incentive application, you would want to then include the award letter in the documents. So that's the process for single-family homeowners. A note on 2 to 4 unit residential buildings. If your customer owns a 2 to 4 unit building, then at least 50% of the units need to be approved for income eligibility for that building to then qualify as an affordable housing building. It doesn't need to be 100%. It just needs to be over 50%. Next slide, please. So similarly to the retail ISI, the residential ISI won't involve a separate application, but there will just be additional checks and features in the existing application. The first, of course, is the check on the DAC census tract when you enter your site address. Like I mentioned before, if you're within a DAC census tract, your project is automatically eligible and no additional documents are needed. Next slide, please. In the case where your site address is not within a DAC census tract, then we would have yes or no questions on the additional project details page for you to specify if your customer meets income eligibility requirements, or if your customer's 2 to 4 unit building qualifies as affordable housing, which again, we would check this by checking that 50% of the units are approved for income eligibility through NYSERDA's IEV application. Next slide, please. So the ISI incentive rate, which would be $450 per kilowatt hour for the first block, and the total incentive would then appear on the project components page as long as you have an address in a DAC tract, or you select yes for either the income eligibility or the affordable housing eligibility question that I mentioned. Next slide, please. Finally, for non-DAC located projects that need to qualify via income, we would request for customers to upload either the IEV approval letter, if you're a single family homeowner as a customer, or your proof of affordable housing eligibility, meaning 50% of your units qualifying for IEV. So just one note here, you would probably not need to see both of these document rows on your application. You would most likely only see one, but they're here for illustrative purposes. Next slide, please. So the timeline and next steps for the residential ISI are basically the same as the retail ISI, but I wanted to highlight some potential future updates to the program design that we will be considering in 2026 after the launch of the first iteration of the program. So firstly, we are considering serving residential customers who have notified their utility of a serious illness or condition that could become life-threatening if electricity is disconnected. These medical needs customers might be eligible for a higher incentive rate if we decide to go that route. Similarly, the customers who have experienced frequent power outages over a historical period might be eligible for a higher rate as well. Next slide, please. So now I'll pass it off to our colleague, Jamie Lackey, who manages the income eligibility verification process.
Thanks, Jasmine. So income eligibility verification. In this section of the webinar, we will be covering the income eligibility application process. Next slide, please. So we'll be diving into more details over the next couple of slides, but for an initial overview, did want to mention income eligibility is determined one of two ways, via categorical eligibility or standard eligibility. Categorical eligibility is when a household is automatically deemed eligible for the program if they receive benefits from low-income assistance programs. Some examples would be HEAP or SNAP. And standard eligibility is where income for all income earning household members is calculated and must fall within specified household size income limits. So quick overview there. But so for the process, customers will log into income eligibility application and they will populate the information below. So household information, the address, electric utility company, ownership status, whether they own or rent, number of household members. This information must match the members added to the household worksheet. And previous Empower approval status, if applicable, that must be dated within the last 12 months. Contractor information and representative name will need to be entered, and contractors will also receive communications sent to the customer. Next slide, please. So customers will be required to upload documents. As mentioned on the previous slide, there's a household eligibility worksheet. This worksheet is required for each application submission, and we must include the names, age, and income sources for all household members. And it's important to note that all household members must be identified and listed on this worksheet, including children and others who may not have any income. Next slide, please. So categorical eligibility, this would be based on an approval or award letter dated within the last 12 months. And this documentation must be the official approval or award letters. And then some additional examples below, already mentioned HEAP and SNAP, but there is OTDA, temporary assistance for needy families, SSI, which is supplemental security income, and then also, as previously mentioned, Empower Plus approval. Next slide, please. So standard eligibility for each income earning household member, they must provide documentation of all forms of income for each member of the household that earns income. And so some examples would be Social Security, disability, workers' compensation, pension, annuities. And then also you can use current year tax returns. So just a quick example, you know, if somebody was applying right now, the current year tax returns would be 2024. If they were applying in, say, June of 2026, then the current year tax returns would be 2025. Some additional documentation examples would be self-employment, IRS report on quarterly earnings, past 3 months, and then all other income. So pay stubs, for example, and some important things to point out here when submitting pay stubs is if someone receives weekly pay stubs, we do require 4 of the most recent, and they also must be consecutive. And by weekly, we require 2 most recent also must be consecutive. Next slide, please. All right, proof of ownership and primary occupancy. So this is required if you're applying for affordable solar, rooftop solar, inclusive storage, incentive only. Important to note, a project serving a building owned by an LLC, corporation, or other business entity is not eligible for income eligibility verification. Business entities may apply to the retail ISI via the affordable housing pathway. So for proof of ownership and primary occupancy, applicants must upload a recent utility bill, so electric, gas, or telephone, must be dated within the last 90 days. And then they also must upload one of the following in the applicant or household member's name: a recent water bill or property tax bill dated within the current fiscal year, or a property deed. Next slide, please. Applications will be reviewed within 3 business days. Customers with incomplete application information will receive outreach. Application approvals will be sent via email to the customer and the contractor. And any inquiries on application status or other questions surrounding income eligibility can be sent to sharedservices@nyserda.ny.gov or by calling 866 NYSERDA. That concludes my portion of the presentation. I will turn it back over to Jasmine.
Next slide, please. Thank you so much, Jamie. So to circle back to the overall timeline and next steps for both the retail and residential ISI, once again, we'll be recording today's presentation and sending out the recording and posting it to the energy storage website as well. Once again, the residential ISI and retail ISI will be launching together in the first quarter of 2026, and we'll be sending out an update to the program manual and energy storage website at that time as well. Also, we will be sending out an email announcement to all of our program contractors closer to the launch date. And if you would like to receive that email announcement, I'd like to highlight that you should join the contractor mailing lists. So when you receive these slides after the presentation, these links will take you to the energy storage mailing list sign up page, as well as the New York Sun mailing list sign up page. So we look forward to staying in touch with you all. Once again, thank you so much for listening to our webinar. And now we can turn it over to the next slide for our Q&A session.
Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, Luke, and thank you, Jamie, for going over this presentation materials. This is Shyam here again to handle the Q&A section. So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat feature of the WebEx so far, which means one or two things. Either we did such a comprehensive job of covering the material that there are no clarifying questions, or that folks are having a hard time navigating the updated WebEx functionality for chat and Q&A. And I do apologize for misleading folks at the top of the webinar with providing outdated visuals on the WebEx chat feature. It has been updated at some point in the past and no longer functions in the same way. So while we're troubleshooting that, and we may need to do that on we may need to do that offline. And in fact, I'm just getting a message about how there is a Slido functionality that may have some questions listed there. So I'll ask the team to look into that. While I, in the meantime, will go over some common questions that have come up from stakeholders as we designed and finalized the program. So let me start with that. Well, again, we're looking into whether additional questions have been submitted through any of the WebEx functionality features that we have in the new build. So first of all, one common question that we have gotten is when it comes to our market rate programs, typically, whether it's residential or retail / CNI, we typically have region-specific incentive blocks. And the question is, what is the case when it comes to region specificity for the ISI incentive? So that's something important to clarify, that both the retail and residential ISI incentives will be administered through a single statewide block, at least initially, versus having separate regional blocks for a variety of factors. And those blocks, or that block for both the Resi ISIs or the retail ISI, as is the case for our market rate programs, will be listed on the energy storage webpage or the dashboard page. So this is, if you're new to the DER program world, our incentive allocations are listed via dashboards that are updated in real time, so that stakeholders have clarity and visibility on what funding remains at any given point in time for a specific incentive. So again, single statewide blocks will be listed on the dashboard, and you'll be getting information on that when these incentives are launched. The second question that we get when it comes to the residential ISI is, are lease systems eligible for this incentive? And the answer is yes, for both the market rate program as well as the ISI variant. Lease systems, as well as in general third-party owned systems, are eligible for the residential ISI, as are direct owned systems. So the program is agnostic when it comes to the ownership profile as pertains to incentive eligibility. Another common question we get is it's around the 60 megawatt allocation for the retail ISI. So for the residential ISI, that is a fixed number. We are targeting a 40% of the overall 200 megawatt residential program allocations, i.e. 80 megawatts will be allocated to the residential ISI. For retail, it's a slightly more nuanced allocation, because we're targeting 40% of the overall on-site retail storage allocations or market. And so that's an estimate right now. As Luke mentioned, I think in the presentation, historically, we have seen that the on-site component of the overall retail program hasn't exceeded 10%. So right now, 40% and 10% of for the new programs of the total procurement volume of 1,500 is 150 megawatts. And so we're initially allocating 40% of that estimated 150 megawatts of on-site, i.e. 60 megawatts, to the retail ISI. That is a minimum allocation based on our current estimate. If it happens, it so happens that the on-site allocations are higher than we've estimated at this time, those may need to be adjusted. So at this point, it's a minimum 60 megawatt commitment. Another common question we get for both programs is the storage system required to be paired with the solar PV system? The answer is no. For both the retail and resi programs, whether they're market rate or the ISI variant, solar pairing is not required. Standalone energy storage systems are eligible for all incentives. Another clarifying point we get particularly from the DAC stakeholders and CBOs is how do the ISI rates compare to the market rates? And so, what the information we went over today only pertain to the first opening blocks for both the residential and retail ISI, which are for residential, I believe it's $450 a kilowatt hour for the first block. And then for the retail ISI, it's $350 a kilowatt hour for the first block there. So in terms of how these compare to the equivalent market rate incentives, roughly speaking, they're about twice the 2x higher than the market rate. So for the residential incentives right now, depending on whether you are based in Con Ed territory, for Con Ed, the incentive is $250 a kilowatt hour, as well as LIPA. And for upstate, it's, I believe, $200 a kilowatt hour. So $450 a kilowatt hour is roughly twice that. Similarly, on the retail side, our current opening block for New York City on the market rate incentive was $125 a kilowatt hour. For rest of state, it's currently the opening rate and the current rate is $175 a kilowatt hour. So again, 2x higher or more is how the ISI rates compare to the market rate incentives. This is a pretty important clarifying point that we probably should have hit in the presentation materials for new contractors, for new installers that are looking to apply for these incentives. Because the basic point here is, as with our other programs in the DER domain, the applications are to be made by the contractor of record, i.e. the installer. And so if you're a new installer, you must first apply to be approved as an approved NYSERDA retail and or residential energy storage contractor before you can even apply for incentives. That process generally takes a few weeks. So again, if you haven't yet done that, that's the very first step that should be completed, whether you're planning to apply for the market rate incentives or the ISI incentives or both. Another important clarifying point is the cap as far as the availability of the incentive for both the residential and retail incentive and the ISI. So this is on the residential side, the total incentive. So the incentives are calculated, as Luke and Jasmine mentioned, on $1 per kilowatt hour of energy capacity basis. So it's basically a sliding scale proportional to the overall system size, but it caps out at 25 kilowatt hours for the residential incentive, both the market rate and ISI, and at 20 megawatt hours for the retail incentive, again, both market rate and ISI. That doesn't mean that you can't build a bigger system and won't be eligible. You will, if you meet all the eligibility criteria. It's just that the incentive payment will be capped at those maximum nameplate capacity levels. Another common question we get is if I'm a contractor or a CBO stakeholder, any stakeholder, and I'm looking to get storage installed at a particular facility, and it's not in the eligible critical facility list that is listed in the program manual when these incentives go live, can it still be eligible in theory? So the answer there is potentially yes. So in other words, the critical facility list that will be listed in the manual is not necessarily exhaustive, but those determinations will be made by the program team on a case-by-case basis based on the merits of that individual, that specific facility or facility type. And through that diligence process, we may then be updating the critical facility list in the manual to include other types of facilities as we go. Another important clarifying question is these ISI incentives, are they adders? With respect to the marketed incentives, in other words, are they stackable on top of the marketed incentives? Because and it's an understandable question, because when a lot of our contractors come from New York Sun, where in most cases the LMI or disadvantaged community incentives are adders, so they stack on top of the base incentive. So that is where the storage program differs from New York Sun, generally speaking. These adders are not, these incentives are not adders. They are meant to be quote unquote full stack incentives. So you can only apply for one or the other, i.e. the marketed variant of a particular segment, retail or resi, or the ISI version. You cannot stack the market rate incentive on top of the ISI incentive. Another question that we've been getting behind the scenes fairly frequently these days is, and this doesn't pertain to the ISI itself, but while we're here, it's just worth clarifying to folks, the implementation plans for the residential retail programs, as well as the program manual, do talk about an enrollment requirement in the given utilities dynamic load management program. And so we were getting questions related to the status of that enrollment requirement, because at this point, we've had a few of these dynamic load management programs, actually specific to residential battery storage. They're sometimes referred to as bring your own battery programs. Some of these have already rolled out this summer and early fall, specifically in National Grid, NYSEG, RG&E, and I believe more recently in Orange and Rockland. And so this DLM enrollment requirement for the incentive program, for the residential incentive program, that has not yet been instituted. It will be instituted in early 2026 for the utilities that I just mentioned that have programs up and running. For further information on this enrollment requirement, which will also hold to the ISI incentives once it's effectuated, there will be a webinar that we will be conducting along with the utility representatives to go over the details of this requirement, the details of how customers can enroll, or how contractors can get customers to enroll in these programs, the OEM approval process for each utility for these programs. All those details will be covered in that webinar. And again, we're targeting that in early 2026. And again, for information on when that will be held, just make sure that you've signed up to the mailing list. And now I see that we have actually been able to unearth the questions that have been submitted via the chat function or via WebEx. So I'm now coming to those. So the first is, for the retail ISI, is it required for the storage system to be configured exclusively for backup power, or can it provide additional benefits on top of providing backup power? See, the answer is the latter. It does not have to be configured exclusively for backup power. It does need to be configured to provide backup power when needed. So that islanding functionality does need to be verified, but absolutely not. The storage project can provide grid services. In fact, we encourage the project to do so, whether it's demand charge mitigation, whether it's optimizing the solar pairing component. There's even funkier configurations where, you can vary between exporting and providing backup power that frankly we haven't contemplated. So on the face of it, no, you do not need to be configured exclusively for backup power. In fact, we encourage setting it up to provide other benefits. Next question. Are these facilities permitted to participate in VPPs in addition to providing backup in hybrid configurations so as to provide financial benefit for the organization and then backup to the community during power outages? Yes, absolutely. To again refer to the previous question, we would encourage that, in fact. Next question. If CDG and remote crediting are not eligible for the retail ISI, does that include a project participating in SSFA? That is correct. If your project is participating in SSFA, the implication is that is a front of the meter project that is injecting into the system and therefore it would not be eligible for the ISI incentives. It would be eligible for the market rate retail incentives. And in fact, we are seeing from the many projects that have already been awarded market rate retail incentives, dominant majority of those, or at least the standalone storage projects that have been awarded, have indicated that they will be participating in SSFA. Next question. When it comes to affordable housing, are Mitchell-Lama affordable multifamily housing properties eligible? The answer is yes. Mitchell-Lama is included in HPD regulated LMI housing for New York City, which is eligible. Next question, where is quote unquote eligible affordable housing unit defined? So here the eligible proxies list, which we showed on which Jasmine showed on during her section of the webinar, and which are currently used by the New York Sun Multifamily Affordable Housing Incentive. Those are what define the eligible affordable housing programs that a property can participate on. So it's again, the eligible proxies list that was shown on that slide. And that's again already being used by our multifamily affordable housing incentive for New York Sun, if you're familiar with that. Next question. Regarding the residential ISI, does the 1 to 4 unit limitation prevent larger multifamily housing developments from utilizing this incentive? So I think we went over this in the presentation, but again, it's worth clarifying. Larger multifamily housing developments are explicitly eligible for the retail ISI in the quote unquote affordable housing facility type, as long as they're participating in an eligible housing program, as will be listed in the program manual. So if you're larger than 4 unit affordable housing, then you would be applying to the retail ISI. And that again, that is analogous, generally speaking, to how the New York Sun multifamily housing incentive eligibility works. Next question, is there a mechanism for renters to take advantage of this program? So the primary intended benefit of both the retail and residential ISI and retail ISI for affordable housing is backup power to the building during outages. So which can help residents stay safe and cool during outages and emergencies. So although the renters wouldn't be applying, wouldn't be directly involved in interacting with the program necessarily, we do hope and intend that that contractors will be working with property owners to apply for incentives for energy storage systems, that are sited at affordable housing properties, so that renters would then benefit from these programs. Question on technology eligibility. Is thermal storage eligible for these incentives? So as with the market rate program and the program as a whole, the program is technology agnostic. So as long as thermal storage can then, that thermal storage system is grid connected, can provide those electric sector related benefits, thermal storage is eligible, as long as it meets our general program requirements that are listed in the program manual right now. Next question, is there a map of the disadvantaged community areas? So, and presumably this is, relating to the application process in which we validate eligibility based on census tract. So yes, the answer is yes. That map is available on NYSERDA's website. Simplest thing I would say is just Google NYSERDA DAC map. It should probably be one of the first 2 results that show up. And it's also linked on the slide in the presentation that discusses the DAC census tract. So I'd also refer to that there. And just as one more reminder, for folks who joined late or who could not make the presentation, these slides will be posted to our residential retail energy storage webinars and presentations page, and a video will also be uploaded to YouTube, I believe, for folks to be able to view the entire webinar. Next question, are there plans for a CDG incentive program for storage? The answer is there already is a CDG incentive program for storage. So CDG storage, as I mentioned, whether it's actually on an opt-in basis or whether participating statewide solar for all, those are eligible for the market rate retail incentives, and in fact have already been awarded incentives. Next question. For the retail ISI, is it required to be sited in a DAC tract and be a critical facility, or just one? The answer is both. The facility must be sited in a disadvantaged community census tract and also be designated as an eligible critical facility type. Next question. Are sites located in municipal utilities eligible for the ISI incentive? So the broader answer to this question is if that utility is a NYPA customer, which many utilities are, then yes, then that site or any site located in that utility would be eligible for the ISI, because NYPA is participating in cost recovery for the residential and retail storage incentives. Next question, would hospitals, laboratories, and similar facilities also need to be nonprofits? The answer is yes. So aside from affordable housing properties, as Jasmine went over, all other eligible facilities that will be supported by the energy storage receiving the ISI, the retail ISI incentive, would either need to be a nonprofit facility or a public facility. That is something we may revisit at a future point, depending on allocation, uptake, and stakeholder feedback. But at this point, we've done extensive engagement and have determined that, at least as far as our launch vision is concerned, the only case of a privately owned facility that would be eligible are eligible affordable housing facilities. This is a question we did expect, that at the very beginning, Luke went over a visual trying to that attempted to delineate between the different varieties of energy storage, between residential storage, on-site retail, off-site retail, and bulk. So when it came to the on-site retail, we had a size range there of 50 to 750 kilowatts. The question is that strict? And the answer is no. That was just illustrative. That is just to tell you to clarify. Generally speaking, these on-site retail storage facilities tend to be within the 50 to 750 kilowatt nameplate range, but that is not meant to be pertaining to any eligibility requirements at all. The actual size cap, so you can actually be of any. There is no minimum size threshold. And the maximum size threshold for retail storage incentive eligibility in general is 5 megawatts, which is not even effectuated through our program. It's what is the size cap for a distributed energy resource system from an interconnection rules perspective. So that is what we hew to. What about next question? What about systems that are larger than 5 megawatts? Are those not eligible for the program? So the answer is no, not at this time. Those do not go through the utility DER interconnection process, and that is a very important. Being tied to that process is a very important part of our programs, our DER programs in general. So those would currently not be eligible for any distributed energy storage incentives. In fact, I'm not really aware of a whole lot of market activity, frankly, in that segment, which is a bit of a gray area between distributed and bulk. So at this time, no, the answer is no, they would not be. Another just basic clarifying question that came up. Are front of the meter storage projects eligible for the ISI? So again, the answer is no. If you're front of the meter, you are essentially a CDG storage project, and there you would be eligible for a market rate retail incentive. Again, you'd be either a remote crediting project, you'd be doing opt-in community storage or opt-out community storage through statewide solar for all, but you would not be eligible for the ISI, because again, the ISI is meant to support the use cases is backup power and then other benefits from on-site storage, including demand charge management and solar optimization if paired with an on-site solar system. Next question, and we're coming to the end here from what I'm seeing on my screen. Where can we learn more about the market rate incentives? So great question. If you're new to the market rate incentive programs, then highly encourage you to visit the NYSERDA website for retail and residential storage incentives. You will see there our program manual posted. That is the best resource for stakeholders that are looking to become more familiar with the market rate programs. And I do think that is an important starting point, even when it comes to the ISI incentives, because to be eligible for the ISI incentives with the residential retail, you do need to meet the eligibility requirements as a contractor and for the system for the market rate programs to begin with. And then there are other additional requirements specific to the ISI variants layered on top of that. So it is important to be familiar with the market rate program in general. So, and again, there, the program manual is your best friend. Last couple of questions. For the retail ISI, is there a sizing constraint relative to the facility's peak load? Can you oversize? So we've given this a lot of thought. At the end of the day, we've decided not to have to require a sizing constraint relative to the facility's peak load. We are not assessing that for the opening build of the ISI for multiple reasons. The last question that I'm seeing here, which I think is similar to a question we received before. Does a project qualify if it is in a non-profit public utility territory within National Grid or one of the other listed eligible utility territories? So again, the simple answer to that question, as directed by the Public Service Commission, is if that utility is a NYPA customer, then yes, that project would be eligible if it meets all the if it meets the eligibility requirements. If that utility is not a NYPA customer, then at this point in time, it would not be. However, if that is the case, we do encourage you to reach out to us so that we can clarify that with absolute certainty before completely ruling out eligibility. And that is all the questions I'm seeing right now. I think we have gone through them. So again, really appreciate everyone's patience for staying with us at up to this point in time. Again, I will make a request for folks to join the energy storage mailing list. If you haven't already, reach out to energystorage@nyserda.ny.gov if you have any follow-up questions, and we'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, look forward to a notification in the first quarter of next year. We are attempting to implement these and launch them as soon as possible. So I don't want to make any promises, but we're targeting early in the first quarter of the year. So again, that will all be, you'll be notified of those developments and updates through the mailing list. So again, thank you very much. Thank you to my NYSERDA colleagues. Hope this was useful and have a good rest of your day.